Hello and welcome everybody to this XTB live news. My name is Walid Koudmani, market analyst for XTB. And in this video, we're going to be talking about the main events happening in the markets this morning, what we can keep an eye on in the second part of the European session and US session, what to keep an eye on the economic calendar point of view, and then we're going to take a look at some charts and see what some major moves are and some key levels to keep an eye on. So let's start with a recap of what happened in the weekend and in this first part of today's session. The weekend was dominated really by the news of the COVID variant in India, and in fact, the record increases that we saw through the end of last week and into the weekend. This is translating into some tension in markets as well in the West, because obviously there is this fear that either the variant or this increase could be transported or even affect these other countries. The difference is that these countries are actually more vaccinated, so there is less of a threat of that, but of course they are taking that into consideration. In fact, many of them, including the US, France, the UK, and a few others, are going to be sending some supplies to help with the vaccination process in India in order to try and avoid and contain this major issue that really is pressuring markets this morning. In fact, we saw it, and I'm going to go and show you on the charts with oil. We're also seeing it with some mixed moves in stock markets and gold, which is approaching once again $1,800, but it's still trading around $1,775. So yesterday's session, the Asian session, ended slightly positively. Today's session started mixed from the European point of view, and we're going to go take a look at what's happening as well in the US markets. The main event today, from a economic calendar point of view, we had the IFO index from Germany. We also had Poland unemployment rate for March and US durable good orders for March as well. In addition to that, the main event really today is the Tesla earnings report, which, as I've mentioned several times in these videos, we've been in the Wall Street earnings season for the last few weeks. Started with the big banks, financial institutions, some huge names, obviously, some effect on the markets. Then last week was a little bit more mixed. This week is going to be a huge week for this as well. Very, very important. Apart from Tesla today, which is the main event, we also have this week Alphabet, Google, Amazon, and a few other major, Apple as well. So we have some really big earning report to keep an eye on, which of course, as some of you may have seen the other webinars I've done myself on the indices, you'll see that these are the companies that really move the index in the sense that they carry most of the weight in these indices, in particular the US 100 and US 500. So this week, key for the earnings report, we're going to be checking back in on Friday with the other XTB live news and seeing how those compared to obviously the projections. Today, high hopes for Tesla, and that's going to be the main event, but that's going to be after the market close of the US session. So if we go and take a look at some charts, let's start with the DAX as always. DAX, as you can see, mixed performance today, but still remains in this range that was reached after this latest upward move, which obviously happened towards the end of last week, towards the end of March, and then led all the way to this other range that extended for all of April almost, with a test of a new all-time high, and then a pullback, but still way above these lows reached at the end of March. So the index around 15,300 points, this high price reaction area, you can see that there's a lot of movement from the price in this area. And if we wanted to draw a lower end, perhaps it would be around 15,156 or 15,160 or even 15,100-ish. So these are the ranges that the index is in. And obviously as the all-time high could be acting as a resistance in the near term, which of course we don't have any other high past that to be acting as a resistance. So once it breaks, or if it does break, then after that it will be uncharted territory and definitely could be changing from day to day. If we want to take a look at the UK index, slightly different performance, more positive, but you can see that it has been recovering as well from this massive drop that we saw after this index also reached a new high around this area towards the middle of the month. Now, again, we can see the similar pattern ranging indices. So we saw that with the DAX. We're seeing another range with the UK 100. And let's take a look. We can draw it like this. And you can see that in theory, around 6,800 could be the support level to keep an eye on. And then 7,000 would be the resistance. And anything in between is still within this range. If we want to make it a little bit smaller, we could do it this way. 6,912, and is actually breaking through the range right now at 6,925. If we want to take a look at the Nasdaq, similar situation with the range, but trying to head higher at the start of today's session. And of course, it will be very important to keep an eye on the progression of the session, any sort of fundamental news coming out, and the earnings reports that I mentioned. US 500, slightly positive as well, testing the all-time highs, as you can see several times here, acted as a resistance, let's say, but not really too many tests. Today's candles and today's session will definitely be important for this. We can see a potential double bottom. We can also see this extension of the upward move. Obviously, the downward move was one candle on the hour, and then some range, and then 3-4 candles to get back up, and is now testing the all-time high, as I said, breaking through all the moving averages. And in fact, the SMA 8 and the 21 are crossing right now, so definitely worth keeping an eye on. And of course, as I mentioned, Tesla and the earnings report will have an impact on these sessions coming into this week. If we take a look at commodities, let's take a look at gold. Gold had a very negative performance for a long time, as many of you know, dropping to around, as you saw, this range twice. We've talked about this $1,678. After that, we saw this massive upward move, managed to break through the range here on the 1,750, let's say. So then it actually tested a high of $1,800 before pulling back slightly. But the pullback ended on this area here, right around the psychological level, which is interesting because it's 1,775. But at the moment, as you can see, it's being tested several times, and every time it's retesting it, and it really does remain to be seen how this is going to work out in the long run, or even in the short term, because you can see that the index, or sorry, the price actually broke below the Ichimoku cloud on the hourly chart, and we're seeing also an increase of the US dollar, which tends to be sometimes negative for the price of gold. If we take a look at oil, on the other hand, oil started the week slightly more negative. As I said, these tensions and these issues with the COVID cases increasing to record levels lead to supply concerns, and also particularly demand concerns on the end of, if there are more lockdowns, obviously demand goes down because there's no transportation or if the ability to move around. So any sort of news that kind of jeopardizes or compromises the progression of the economic recovery from the pandemic, any sort of news like that does tend to have an impact on obviously indices, but also the price of commodities like oil in particular, and even gold on sometimes. So if we go and take a look at oil, as I said, around 64.40 or just above the 64 mark, you saw this area has been tested several times, acted as a resistance in the past, and now is acting as a support. Still remains below the Ichimoku cloud, attempted to break through it, but failed and then pulled back. So definitely down from these highs reached a few weeks ago, or a few days ago, sorry. And it with these demand concerns, it remains to be seen if we'll be able to rebound. But this area is acting as support for the time being, and then potential resistance could be found around 65. If we want to draw the line on that end, let's say 65.40 as nearest resistance tested. If we want to take a look at WTI, a similar situation, although a little bit more interesting, because you can see the prices on the 4 hours traveling in the Ichimoku cloud, and just now trying to break through it, testing also the 100 SMA and dropping below 200 SMA and the 50 SMA. So, but it remains above the key level that we've talked about in the past of $60. So right around here, as you can see, the price ranged below it for a long time, first with some very big moves and then smaller and smaller until it moved upward towards almost 64.30, and then pulled back and now is trading in the Ichimoku cloud. So key level to keep an eye on, but still remains above the $60 range. If we want to take a look at some currencies on the market analysis section, we'll see that the US dollar, the euro are slightly mixed performances. The pound is more positive, but the Australian dollar and the New Zealand dollar are doing better. Even the Canadian dollar are actually doing better. So let's take a look at some pairs and see how that is translating on the charts. We'll see that pound USD, after reaching a high of, once again, just above 140, pulled back once again. This area seems to be very, very difficult to break. As you can see, after breaking it just slightly here, it pulled back and dropped to 136.7. But this time, after testing it once again, the price actually dropped to 138.3 and then rebounded from this level, which in the past acted as a resistance and now is acting as a support, and still remains above it. 138.8, approaching 139, but this is a key range because the price has had a lot of difficulty breaking both upward and downwards. So once this range is broken, perhaps there are some other levels that we could keep an eye on, but for now, 139, 139.4, and then 138.3 are the levels that the price seems to be testing. If we take a look at euro dollar, it's still slightly negative performance, but because the euro and the dollar are mixed, we can see that euro dollar is actually trading still above 120, which key level acted as a resistance in the past, acted as a support also, but really mainly has been a difficult resistance to break once again after the price dropped or after the pair dropped below it. Now let's take a look at the USD index though. If we overlay a chart of the USD index, we'll see that today some weakness from the pair, but we saw some strength from the dollar, so could be just related to strength from the dollar. But it really is important to also keep an eye on for the USD index because it does compare the US dollar to not just one currency, but several. And so it sometimes helps identify, as you can see, that it is quite symmetrical. And it can help identify if the moves are due to the main currency's weakness or the US dollar's strength. So in this case, we're having a little bit of both, which is why these candles aren't too big. So, and that's all for today. Thank you very much for watching. My name is Walid Koudmani. Don't forget in XTB's Investing Day this week. So it's a big event. If you'd like to follow it, of course, feel free to contact your account manager. We'll be contacting you as well on WhatsApp with a message. And yeah, good luck with your trading. We'll catch up at the end of the week after the earnings season. So thank you for watching and good luck with your trading, as I said.